Would you believe a baby could see what hundreds of grown-ups ignored every single day? That a child who couldn't even speak yet could understand something the rest of the world refused to notice? Because this story begins with a crowded sidewalk. The kind people walk down every day without a second thought, where busy feet shuffle past shops and the air is full of small talk. Car horns and the silent hum of a city that never really looks up, and there in the middle of it all, just outside a small coffee shop with plastic chairs and tired umbrellas, sat a German shepherd, tall and proud and still, as if carved into the concrete, but not because he wanted to be there. No, he was there because he had nowhere else to go. And while his fur looked clean and his eyes were still bright, the truth was, people didn't care. They pointed sometimes. They chuckled. Some even muttered under their breath that he was probably dangerous or broken or unwanted. And every day, people walked right past him like he was invisible, like he didn't have a story or a soul, and he never barked, never chased, never begged. He just waited, his ears twitching at every voice, his tail flicking only when a toddler or an old man glanced at him with the kind of curiosity only innocence brings. Because deep down this dog wasn't lost. He was holding on to something, something only he understood. And nobody knew how long he had been doing this. Sitting in that exact spot every morning and staying until the last customer left the bakery, across the street, always sitting, always watching, never causing trouble, but still, nobody asked. Nobody wondered, and slowly people started calling him names, muttering things like dumb mutt or crazy stray. Even though he wore a faded collar and a tag too scratched to read, even though he clearly belonged to someone once, maybe, even to a family that had children and laughter and Sunday dinners, and perhaps he once had a soft bed by the window and someone who whispered his name in the dark when storms made the house tremble. But none of that mattered now, not to the world that had long stopped caring, and then came the day everything changed, the kind of day that would become a story passed from one family to the next, and it began not with a miracle, but with a moment. A single ordinary moment that held extraordinary meaning, because while everyone else walked by again, talking into phones and sipping coffee, and pretending not to see the lonely dog on the sidewalk, a baby no older than 12 months stopped, wobbling on his tiny legs in a blue onesie that was slightly too big, one hand holding a rubber toy, the other reaching out toward the dog as if pulled by something unseen. And in that second time seemed to pause. The noise of the city softened, and the sun hit just right, casting a golden warmth over the dog's face and the baby's tiny hand as it hovered in the air, full of pure, unfiltered kindness, because the baby didn't see a stray, didn't see something to fear or mock. He saw a friend, a presence, a soul, and the dog. The dog looked up, his eyes locking onto the baby's, and for the first time, in what felt like years, his ears perked forward, his body leaned ever so slightly, and a sound soft and low like a hum of recognition escaped his throat. Not a growl, not a bark, just a whisper of life that had been buried for too long. And the baby giggled, dropping his toy and clapping once, as if he'd been waiting to meet this dog his whole short life. And parents around the scene watched for a moment, amused and distracted, snapping pictures for social media, not realizing they were witnessing the first step in a story that would shake their hearts in ways they didn't expect, because in that baby's eyes, this dog wasn't a stray, wasn't broken, wasn't a problem. He was something sacred, something beautiful, and as the baby toddled closer, the dog didn't move away, didn't flinch, didn't retreat like he had with So many others. He stayed, his head lowering slightly in a gesture of calm, of acceptance, of gratitude. And no one knew yet that this moment would uncover something buried beneath the surface of an entire town, something so powerful it would bring tears to strangers and make them believe again in things like fate, loyalty, and the invisible threads that tie souls together. And as you listen to this story, wherever you are, maybe on your couch with your own dog curled up beside you, or on a walk with the sound of birds and passing cars in the background, I want you to think about the last time you saw someone being overlooked, someone who might have needed just a little recognition, and tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Because stories like this don't belong to just one street or one city, They live in the hearts of anyone who's ever believed in second chances. And this is just the beginning. The baby stood there a little longer than anyone expected, his small hands outstretched, eyes wide with that kind of wonder only a child can carry without question. And while the parents nearby began to shift nervously, whispering things like, "Is that dog safe?" or "Someone should call animal control," the baby took another step forward, wobbling slightly but fearless, while the dog lowered his head even more, as if bowing to the only person who had truly seen him in months, maybe years. And it was in that moment, in the pause between two breaths, that something shifted, not just in the air, but in the energy of that street corner, as if the sidewalk itself was remembering something it had long forgotten. Because what no one knew, not the barista pouring lattes behind the counter or the jogger slowing down to glance at the strange scene, was that this wasn't the first time the dog had reacted this way. No. Every day he sat there watching people go by. But this time was different. Not because of who the baby was, but because of what the dog remembered, and deep in the quiet corners of his memory lived another child, a little boy with similar eyes and the same fearless curiosity. A boy who used to play in a backyard with chalk and a plastic fire truck, a boy who used to wrap his arms around the dog's neck during thunderstorms and whisper, "I'm not scared when you're here," and though the details were fading, the feeling never left. And maybe that's why the dog had stayed rooted to this same sidewalk for so long, waiting for something, someone, some kind of sign that the love he had given hadn't vanished into the world unnoticed. As the baby giggled again and plopped down beside the dog without fear, a quiet stir began to move through the crowd. People stopped walking, they slowed, turned, and some even smiled. Though most still didn't understand what they were seeing, but there was one man who did. An older man in a beige coat standing beside a fruit cart. Someone who had been watching this dog for weeks, who fed him the occasional piece of apple when no one was looking, who had once tried to read the dog's tag but found it too damaged to make sense of. And this man, this gentle soul, squinted through his thick glasses and whispered to no one in particular, "He's never led anyone that close before." And the words seemed to hang in the air like a cloud, too soft to rain, and even though people started recording on their phones and chuckling at the cuteness of it all, there was something beneath the surface, something that felt bigger than a viral video or a passing moment. And as the dog gently leaned into the baby's side, resting his chin on the child's shoulder like a knight bending to a king, the baby giggled so hard he tipped over, but the dog caught him with a gentle nudge, correcting his balance with a single paw, and for a moment it looked like they had known each other forever. Like this wasn't the first time they had sat together under a sky full of moving feet and forgetful minds. And when the parents finally stepped in, pulling the baby back with polite smiles and cautious hands, the baby reached back over his mother's shoulder, waving his chubby fingers and saying a single word that no one had taught him. A word no one expected, a name, soft and barely audible. But the moment it escaped his lips, the dog's ears shot up, his body stiffened. When his eyes locked onto the child like a key sliding into a forgotten lock, because the word "the baby" had said wasn't just a sound, it was a memory. A ghost of the past spoken in a voice that shouldn't have known it. And the dog stood slowly, eyes wide, body trembling not with fear but recognition. And the man in the beige coat took a single step forward, jaw slightly open, eyes misting, because he had heard that name before too. Years ago on a missing poster outside the same bakery. On a notice stapled to a telephone pole where people never look up, a name attached to a child who had vanished. One night without a trace, a child and his dog both gone like shadows swallowed by the dark. And while the child had been found months later, returned to a broken family by someone whose face no one remembered. The dog had never been seen again, until now, maybe, possibly, if this really was him. And if the baby's voice had somehow awakened something that lay buried inside that loyal heart, then maybe the world was about to learn that not all bonds disappear, that sometimes a soul can be carried across years and bodies and still be heard if someone's listening. And as the parents buckled the baby into his stroller, trying to distract him with toys and snacks, the dog followed, not barking, not whining, just walking slowly behind them, as if he had been waiting for this moment forever. And people moved aside, confused, some rolling their eyes, some whispering.
Nice.
He's probably just hungry. But the baby kept looking back, his little hands outstretched again, and when the parents turned the corner and walked into the small park near the end of the block, the dog hesitated, standing at the edge of the path like a soldier unsure of his orders, until the baby made a sound. A soft coo that echoed like a call across time, and that's when the dog followed, tail wagging low, paws soft against the gravel, and in that moment, the story truly began. Not in the way fairy tales begin, but in the quiet way real miracles do. It's unnoticed, unscripted, born not of magic, but of the powerful force that lives in every heart that is ever truly loved. And if you're listening to this with your own dog nearby, resting their head on your foot or curled up beside you, ask yourself, have you ever felt like they know more than they show? That maybe, just maybe, they're holding memories too old for words, and if you believe that, tell me. What's your dog's name and where are you watching from, because something tells me they're listening too. There are moments in life so strange, so deeply unexplainable, that the human mind has no choice but to call them coincidence. But those who live with animals, who have sat in silence while a dog stares at an empty doorway, minutes before the knock arrives, who have wept into fur and felt a paw placed gently on their chest without a word spoken. No, there's something more, something that can't be measured or photographed or explained away. And as the German Shepherd followed the baby into the park that afternoon, not with urgency or excitement, but with a quiet sense of return, of belonging, of something long buried rising slowly to the surface, something began to stir in the people watching, in the leaves that rustled above the stroller, in the old man on the bench who narrowed his eyes as if he too recognized the dog from somewhere deep in the past. And while the baby's parents chatted near the swing set, distracted and half aware, the baby sat up in his stroller, reaching toward the dog who now laid beside him like a guardian reclaimed from a forgotten legend, ears alert, chest rising, and falling with slow, steady breaths. And when the baby touched his nose, the dog didn't move away. Instead, he licked the child's hand once, then laid his head down again, eyes still on the horizon, as if waiting for something else. Something not yet arrived, and it was then that a woman walking her own terrier froze, her face twisting with confusion as she stared at the dog and whispered. Max, and the dog didn't move, didn't turn, but his ears flicked, a signal only those who knew him might notice. And the woman knelt slowly, staring harder now, trembling a little, and said again, Max, is that you? And still he stayed still, but the baby suddenly looked at her and said, softly, the same name, Max, clear and full, a name he'd never been taught. And the woman gasped, her eyes filling with tears as she reached out, fingers shaking. It can't be. He disappeared 4 years ago, with the boy, with Josh. And at the sound of that name, the dog's eyes finally met hers, and for just a second, the years melted away, and a moment passed between them that left the woman covering her mouth and sobbing quietly, because she had known that dog had babysat the little boy who had loved him. It had mourned them both when the family moved away in tragedy. When the boy was found days later by rescuers, but never quite the same again, and the dog, he was never found, not until now. Not until a baby who couldn't possibly know him had spoken his name like a lullaby, whispered across lifetimes. And the woman's voice trembled as she explained to the baby's mother what she remembered, how the boy had vanished while playing in the backyard, how the dog had chased after something, and the two had gone missing for days, how the boy was found alone by the river, shivering and silent, never able to speak about what happened, and how the dog had vanished as if he'd been swallowed by the earth. And as the mother listened, her face changed, her eyes scanning the dog with new meaning, and then to her own baby, and for the first time, strange unease began to settle in her heart, not fear but wonder, because what were the odds? How could a child who had never been told that name know it, and why did the dog follow only him? As if the world had blurred and only this tiny boy mattered. And that night at home, the baby would not sleep without the dog curled beside his crib. And though the parents were hesitant, something in their son's joy, his calm, made them allow it. And as the baby slept, the dog did not. His ears twitched at every sound, His eyes scanned the room with the quiet, calculated rhythm of someone who had once lost what he loved and was now determined to never let it happen again. And as the night passed and the moonlight danced across the nursery walls, something even more curious began to happen. The baby started humming in his sleep, a soft, repetitive tune no one had taught him. And the dog, eyes wide open, let out the faintest whine, a sound that belonged to a memory too heavy to carry. And in the baby's humming was the melody of a song the missing boy used to sing, one the dog had heard 1,000 times before, beside a sandbox and under a treehouse. And maybe you're thinking this sounds impossible. Maybe you're wondering how any of this could be true, but if you've ever looked into a dog's eyes and felt they knew exactly how you were feeling, if you've ever had a dog sit beside your sick bed without moving for hours, or seen them howl before the phone rang with bad news, then you know deep down, dogs don't forget. They don't question the impossible. They just feel it, carry it, protect it, and maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a new story at all. Maybe it was the continuation of one left unfinished years ago. And if you believe in second chances, if you believe a heart can find its way back to the place it was first broken, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt like your dog was sent to you for a reason? And where are you listening from tonight? Because I have a feeling someone else, someone quiet and loyal, is listening too. There are things that live inside a dog's heart that no one will ever see. Not because they are secret, but because dogs don't speak. They simply show, and if you're paying attention, they will reveal entire stories through a glance, twitch, a pause before crossing a room. And that night, as the baby slept soundly for the first time in days, the dog laid quietly beside the crib, not moving, not sleeping, just breathing slowly, as if every rise and fall of his chest held back a tidal wave of emotion. Because he wasn't just guarding the child, he was remembering, and somewhere behind those eyes was a memory so heavy, so full of love and guilt, that even time had failed to bury it. Because 4 years ago, in a different neighborhood, near a different house with blue shutters and a swing hanging from the porch, there was a little boy named Josh who loved him more than anything in the world, who once said that when he grew up, he would marry his dog. And though everyone laughed, the dog didn't, because he believed it too. And then came the night that changed everything. The night that still echoed in the dog's bones every time a door creaked or a branch scraped a window. Because Josh had been playing in the yard as the sun fell, chasing fireflies and singing softly. The dog had been watching, always watching. When something pulled the boy away, not a person, not a danger, but a noise. Something unfamiliar in the woods. And the boy wandered, as boys do, and the dog followed, as dogs do. And what happened next was no one's fault. But it would become the defining pain of the dog's life. Because they got lost, the sun went down, and the cold came fast, and Josh cried. But the dog stayed beside him, curling his body around the boy to keep him warm, licking his tears and barking low to keep away shadows. But by morning, when the boy had stopped crying and fallen asleep, the dog knew something was wrong, because his legs were weak, and his paws were bleeding from walking in circles trying to find a way out. And when the rescue teams came days later, they found the boy curled alone beneath a fallen tree, whispering nothing, eyes glazed with fear, and the dog was nowhere to be seen. Not because he had run, but because he had gone for help, dragging his body through brambles and mud, trying to find something, anything, and when he returned to the spot, the boy was gone, taken back to warmth, to safety, but the dog broken and tired. Never saw him again. In that moment, the failure to be there when it mattered most, it never left him. And so he wandered, searching, retracing every scent, every sidewalk, until he found a place that felt familiar, not because it was the same, but because it felt like it could be. And he stayed there, outside that cafe, on that street for days, then weeks, then years, not moving. It's not chasing cars or barking at strangers, just sitting waiting, because dogs don't know how to give up, not when they love, not when their purpose is still unfinished. And that's why. When the baby reached out and said his name, the dog didn't just react. He remembered, because it wasn't just the name, it was the tone, the shape of the syllables, the melody. of it, and the baby, though born years later, carried something in his voice that stirred a place in the dog that had been silent for too long. And as the days passed, and the dog became a permanent part of the baby's routine, always nearby, always watching, the parents began to notice things too. How their son, who had once struggled with night terrors, now slept peacefully when the dog was near. How he hummed songs they didn't know. How he seemed to listen intently when the dog stared at a corner of the room or nudged a certain drawer, and slowly, unease gave way to awe, because even the pediatrician noticed it, saying the boy's emotional regulation had improved, that he seemed calmer, more centered, as if something had clicked inside him. And while science might offer explanations, those who watched the pair knew it wasn't just coincidence. And one afternoon, while cleaning the garage, the mother found a box of old baby clothes from a neighbor who had moved away, and inside was a faded envelope, addressed to the family next door, unopened, water-stained. And inside it, a photo, curled and soft with time, of a little boy holding a German shepherd, laughing under a tree with a swing behind them. And on the back, written in a child's scrawl, were the words, "Me and Max, forever," and beneath that, another name, one they hadn't expected, the family who had lived there years ago, who had lost a dog and moved away in heartbreak, and that night, as the baby laid his hand on the dog's chest and whispered the same song again, the dog licked his fingers, closed his eyes, and for the first time since that terrible night in the woods, he slept without twitching, without guarding, without fear, because he was home again, not in a house, but in a soul. And if you've ever had a dog look at you like you're the only thing that matters, like they were made just for you, then you understand what this means. And if you believe some bonds are too strong for even time to erase, tell me in the comments, what was your dog's name, and how did they change your life? Because somewhere, maybe just outside your window, another silent hero might be waiting to be seen. Some say dogs don't understand time, that they live only in the present. But anyone who has watched a dog sit by a door long after someone's gone, or wait by a grave long after everyone else has left, knows that dogs remember, not in minutes or hours, but in love, in scent, in echoes of touch and tone. And Max, the German shepherd who had waited for years on a busy sidewalk for something even he couldn't name, had finally found it again, not in the same form, not in the same little boy he had once curled around under a cold night sky, but in a child whose voice carried the music of a soul Max had never stopped loving. As the baby and the dog grew inseparable in the weeks that followed, something beautiful began to happen, not just in the baby's life, where tantrums faded and sleep came easier, or in the dog's life, where food was warm and blankets were soft again, but in the people around them, in the neighbors who had once ignored the dog and now stopped to greet him, in the cafe owners who left bowls of water outside with handwritten signs that read for Max, our town's hero, in the parents who watched with tears in their eyes as their child bloomed, in ways they never imagined. Because sometimes healing doesn't come from medicine or therapy or time alone. Sometimes it walks in quietly on four legs and lays down beside you until the pieces start to stitch themselves back together. And one morning, as autumn leaves danced across the porch and sunlight poured into the nursery, the baby stood for the first time, not just with wobbly steps, but with full confidence, one hand gripping the edge of the crib, the other reaching toward Max. And as he walked across the rug, arms out, giggling, Max stood too, step for step, beside him, like he had once done with another boy in another life. And when the baby fell, Max was there, nudging gently, waiting, never rushing. And when the baby laughed again, that laugh carried through the window and into the hearts of every neighbor who remembered the day the dog was mocked and ignored. And it was around then that something strange began to happen, the kind of thing you might hear in a small-town legend, or in the whispered conversations of families after dinner, because more people started visiting that sidewalk, not because they were told to, but because they felt drawn to see where it all began, where the dog had waited, to stand in the spot where a child's kindness changed everything. Someone even painted a mural, a soft watercolor of a baby touching a dog's nose. With the words, "He waited, and she saw," and people cried when they walked past it. Strangers left flowers and dog treats. An old man who rarely spoke brought an old collar and quietly laid it beside the wall, saying, "For mine," and walked away. And soon, Max became more than just a pet. He became a symbol of loyalty that never ends, of the idea that no matter how long you are overlooked, seen as less, mocked, or forgotten, someone, somewhere, will see you, will recognize your soul, and when they do, everything changes. In years past, seasons turned and Max aged like all dogs do. Slower now, his steps more careful, but still, he followed the boy. Now walking strong and fast and full of life, and the boy, now old enough to talk in full sentences, would often pause mid-play, look down at Max, and say things like, "Thank you for finding me," or "I love you, old friend." And sometimes, when no one was watching, Max would lift his head slightly and exhale, not in pain or exhaustion, but in peace. And one day, when the sky was soft with rain and the boy had fallen asleep on the couch, Max laid beside him one last time, his head on the child's lap, his eyes closing gently, not because he was alone or forgotten, but because he had finally finished what he started. And the next morning, the town woke to news that brought both tears and warmth, that Max had passed peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by the love he had once lost and finally found again. And the mural on the sidewalk was lit with candles, stuffed animals, notes written in crayon and shaky handwriting that read things like, "Thank you, Max, and you were the best dog ever." And the boy, though young, understood in a way no one could explain, and he sat by the mural with his hand on the wall, saying softly, "You're still here, I know. And if dogs live in love, then Max never left, because sometimes a goodbye isn't an ending. It's a doorway, and Max had simply walked through, knowing the boy would be okay and the town would remember. And maybe tonight, as you sit in your living room with your dog nearby, or walk alone down a quiet road under a starlit sky, you'll think of Max and what he waited for and what he waited, what he found, and you'll ask yourself, what is your dog holding silently for you? What have they carried across time and tears? And if you feel it too, tell us in the comments. Where are you listening from? What's your dog's name? And how did they change your life? Because stories like these are not fiction. They're memory, they're love, and they're yours now too.